Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this next session. And this is going to be, as all of them have been, amazing, powerful, everything. I'm looking forward to this one. I've been uh, waiting on this one also since I saw the kind of the trailer for this session that Matt put out. This is my good buddy. This is Matt Grogan. He is an instructor with the Denise Amberley Foundation, and this session is called 22 Words. Take it away, my friend.
All right, thank you, Ricardo. I appreciate everyone being here today. Good morning from sunny Las Vegas, Nevada, and it is still morning for me at least. I know it was for Leslie as well, being on the West Coast. So I appreciate. I know it's afternoon for some of us. Of course, it's right around lunchtime, so I'm going to try and make sure that we keep this a little bit upbeat as best as I can, because what I'm going to talk to you about today is heavy, and you're gonna see some videos today. You're gonna hear some audio today that's heavy. There's really no other way to put it. In that, it is what we do every day, but again, it's just kind of really expressing kind of the worst of what we deal with every day. Now, Ricardo had mentioned a trailer that he had kind of really helped me put together. But it's really just, I want to kick off the class by playing that again for you to kind of put you in the mindset of what we're going to talk about today. And I really love the fact that I followed Leslie and everything that she talked about training the adult learner, because this is another session that's going to deal with a lot of it's on training. And I'm going to really speak to my visual and kinesthetic learners as what she talked about in her session, but you're just kind of really putting it all together. And this is just one of those components in building effective training programs and looking at kind of going full circle. And you're gonna hear me say that kind of in the third part of this session today. So I'm going to show you a short little video. It's about 3 minutes long. There is a warning on it. There are some pictures. There's some audios that are tough to listen to and tough to see. So just another fair warning. But again, I want you just to ask yourself, are you ready? As you're watching this, are you ready? I have two damn firefighters in front of Trent Nine. Help. This bad Echo 7, I'm hit. I'm hit in my neck someplace. Arms are broken. Help me, please. Respect me to my family, bro.
Dispatch, you got a large crowd running from the music festival down here. Do you have reports of anything? Sounds like gunfire.
I apologize about the audio cutting out there kind of in the middle of the video. I forget that when I mute my mic, I have a separate external mic here, and every time I hit mute, it also silences the audio for my presentation. So I apologize about that. I'll give everyone access to that video. You can find it on my Facebook. You can find it on Ricardo's Facebook on the Within the Trenches page if you want to listen to it or share it or play it in any kind of your training sessions. I really urge you to. All of what you saw there are generally most of our worst nightmares of having to deal with an officer that has shots fired or is being shot at, having a Mayday situation in a fire, having a 911 call where it's so traumatic and it really just punches you in the gut and punches you in the face. And at the end there, it was 22 words that Engine 11 said that changed. It changed my life. It changed my city's life. It changed my center's life. And today we're going to talk about some things that you can do that when you're faced with your 22 words, whatever they might be, you'll be just a little bit more prepared. So the first question I have for you is, are you ready? Are you ready to deal with an event of that magnitude, but even just general critical events overall? And even if you think your answer is yes, and I really hope it is, and it's fantastic as it is, but is all of your communication staff ready for that event? Because this is not a team of one. All right, this takes an entire center, it takes an entire organization, it takes an entire community to respond to these kinds of events. And lastly, does your training program prepare you for these kinds of events? And today we're going to talk a little bit about some of those things that can prepare you for those kind of things. I kind of skipped it because I really just kind of want to get into the video. So I'm going to go back to it real quick. Just for those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Matt Grogan. I'm an instructor with the Denise Amber Lee Foundation. We've had several sessions here today. And of course, hopefully everyone knows Nathan Lee and the story of his beautiful wife, Denise. And that's why I'm here today with the foundation. I started in public safety communications in 2005 with an agency called DUCOM, or DuPage Public Safety Communications, which is just outside of Chicago. After about 10 years and just kind of looking for a different challenge, I decided that I wanted to kind of experience what a bigger city was like. Not that Chicago's not big, but just working for a bigger city. I took an opportunity with the Combined Communications Center of Las Vegas Fire and Rescue, where I am still today as a emergency communications specialist. I'm an EMP through NINA. I got a lot of letters and alphabets after my name. A lot of that doesn't really matter today. But I'm here to talk to you today about a lot of the things that I've learned with the foundation and the experience of working the Route 91 Harvest Festival. Now, what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about 4 different points today. We're going to talk a little bit about why we train in our centers and making sure we're really curtailing, especially continuing education for the right reasons. We're going to talk about, again, to my visual and my kinesthetic learners, we're going to talk about reality-based training and how if you incorporate that into your training program, it could really make you successful in critical events and as Gordon Graham would say, those low-frequency, high-risk events. The third portion of the session, we're going to talk about looking beyond your training program to make sure that you're prepared for these kind of things, and then preparing for the aftermath of what happens. So why do we train? I mean, why do we train every day in our centers? Whether it's training as a new hire, or when you go to classes, or if you've attended any of the classes that Nathan teaches, that I teach, that Josh or Tina or any of us that teach with the foundation, we really try and keep this mentality, is the fact that we're not just trying to teach you ordinary things. We're trying to prepare you for the extraordinary or the extraordinary things that happen in our jobs, because that's really what can make or break what we do, is that extraordinary thing that happens to us. But when we look at why we train, and when we just look at a base level, we train because we're new to the job. We're new to the industry. We have a new policy. We have a new protocol that just went out. I mean, especially all of us that have gone through COVID over the past 5 years, it's felt like, but about 7-8 months, we've probably gone through 37 policy changes. Especially in those first initial weeks and months, it was really just overwhelming, and always having to train on a lot of new stuff. Anytime we get new equipment or new technology, I'm hoping that there's some training, and it's not just plugging it in and going, okay, here's your new tool, kind of do with it what you want. Having a new town, a new jurisdiction, a new department, a lot of us are facing consolidations. That was really huge when I was in Illinois. It was state mandated consolidation. When I started in 2005, we had about 24 different police, fire, and EMS agencies we dispatched for. When I left, we were upwards of 48. And just the amount of training it took to onboard each one of those departments and their specific policies. And now we have new responses for other CE hours, your certifications, your licenses, your CPRs, your EMDs, your EFDs, your EPDs, all those kind of things. And then last but not least, my always favorite thing is we're going to train because something went wrong. All right, we're going to have that remedial training. We got to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And all those things are fantastic. And they are so necessary to get us into just the basics of what we do every day. But I want you to take your training program and ask yourself a couple of these questions. And this is this what you're really trying to get out of your training program? Are you trying to build teamwork? Are you trying to improve communication? Because that's half of what teamwork is just being able to talk to each other. Are you trying to improve decision making? That whether you are brand new or whether you're seasoned and you've been there for 10, 15, 20 years, is your decision making the same? Are you triaging through calls the same way? If you're given 5 different calls, how do you prioritize them, even if they're same priority level? If they're all just critical, how do we process through 5 critical calls, and just kind of improving that general decision making, especially as a supervisor? Making sure that you're training and looking at and improving your decision making, reducing complacency, especially for people that have been there for any amount of time, making sure that we just don't get in that rut. That as we're going on further these days, we're not seeing simple responses. Our simple responses are becoming more and more complex. And what used to just be a building fire, and even for me that has done this for 15 years, I can sit behind the console and go through a run-of-the-mill building fire, but all it takes is a split second for it to go south. I don't know if it had cut out that point in time. The Mayday audio there in the beginning from the Chicago Fire Department, it was just one of those, again, run-of-the-mill fires. A wall collapsed. They had some firefighters that got trapped. It was Corey Ankum, Edward Stringer, and unfortunately 2 of those brave souls were lost that day. And it's just, are you just thinking, hey, this is just another run-of-the-mill fire, or am I prepared for it to escalate? Am I prepared for it to just kind of go wherever it chooses to go? Because, again, we have no control over that. Again, preparing for critical incidents. I've already said high-risk, low-frequency events. And then building confidence. All right, training builds confidence, and it helps us conquer Mount Stupid. All right, has anyone even heard of that term, Mount Stupid? Maybe some of us have. It's from the Dunning-Kruger effect. If anyone has seen this kind of picture, this kind of graph, I used to always kind of equate it to when you first get your driver's license. Remember when I was 16, I got my first driver's license and I was finally out on my own. And that's when you're at that peak of Mount Stupid, where you think like you are the best and you don't really have a whole lot of knowledge. You have a whole lot of experience, but you think you just know it all. And then that stupid thing happens. And then you kind of go into what they call that valley of despair. And hopefully in a good, solid training program, you're still even might have some peaks of Mount Stupid, but we're really just going to try and level that playing field a little bit, especially not getting into that valley of despair, but having that plateau and that slope of enlightenment, making sure that we're just getting the best out of our employees. And then lastly, and almost most importantly, is we train to lower stress levels. The more you know of what's going to come to you and what's going to happen to you, and the more that you're prepared for these kind of events, I guarantee you wholeheartedly, the lower your stress levels are going to be. This is from an article written by Elliot. I put David there. I apologize. It's Elliot Davis. He's a communications manager at Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. He was a communications manager in charge during 1 October during the shooting, and the fantastic Christina Dravis gave us an opportunity for him and I to write articles from each one of our perspectives for APCO's PSC magazine. And this is one of the best things that I took out of his article, and saying that the habits we develop when we take less stressful calls during slower times and training, I'll take it a little bit farther, are the things you fall back on when critical incidents occur. And the best way to mitigate a lot of that stress of a critical incident is having those strong foundational skills. If anyone that has taken Nathan's victims plea class, whether it is with me or any point, one of the things that really hits home to me is after we listened to Denise's call, he puts the quote up there in the fact that you don't often act up, you act to your minimum level of training, because that's what becomes automatic to us. So if you're not pushing that envelope and trying to raise that bar of that minimum level of training, that's all you're going to get. And so that's why it's really important for us as dispatchers, as trainers, as CTOs, as leaders in this 911 environment to continue to push that training envelope. So we're not only prepared because we have a responsibility to be prepared, but also to make sure that we're preparing our dispatchers and our rookies and our new people, just so it's not stressing them out, it's not burning them out, and they can respond to those incidents kind of better. And one of the best ways I feel like you can do that is with what we call reality-based training. You hear that term a lot when it comes to officers in the field, and as they go through weapons training and coming in contact with suspects, and again, having to draw their guns, and just having that secondary nature of what they have to go through. You can do those kind of things in your center. Reality-based training is as what it says there on the screen for you. It's any kind of training that utilizes tools, techniques, or methodologies to basically just simulate what you're going to do in an operational setting. And we're going to talk about a couple points today quickly about things you can do that can help your reality-based training be as successful as possible. And I'm going to kind of correlate it into some of the things that happen to us in Las Vegas that make doing these kind of things incredibly important. Now, when you look at reality-based training, even if you've never done it, if you haven't gone through drills in your center or anything like that, we've been doing it since we were kids. If you go back to your school days, elementary, middle school, high school, anytime you had a fire drill, one of those awesome moments because you got to get up out of class, but you heard the alarms go off, everyone kind of got up, practice getting in that single file line, walking outside. That was you going through reality-based training. It was you preparing for if that moment was to happen, if you were to have a fire or if you needed to evacuate the building quickly, you already knew what to do because you had already trained on it. And you had to do it over and over and over, year after year after year. And so we've been doing this since we were kids, and that's why they always say, let's walk before you run. And that's why, baseball teams and football teams and stuff practice over and over and over again. I mean, playing football my entire life through high school and through college, I used to hate practice, but it was all that reality-based training preparing you for that game day. It also helps you familiarize yourself with a concept of a new response plan, or with new towns, with new jurisdictions, test the effectiveness of your policies and procedures in a realistic setting. And one of the things that I think is most important for reality-based training is being prepared for that bounce back, of what I call the bounce back. And the bounce back is something that I've kind of taken from a Mike Tyson quote. I would say my favorite Mike Tyson quote, but I don't know if there's really a whole lot of them. But Mike Tyson used to always say, as everyone was approaching how they were going to fight him, especially at his peak, was everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I mean, that is kind of what we are in dispatch. Is you have all these fantastic procedures and protocols and training, but when you finally have that incident that punches you in the mouth, what do? Do you collapse? Is it TKO? Are you knocked out? Or are you able to bounce back from it? And reality-based training really prepares you for that. Now, when it comes to the Las Vegas shooting, we were really great response to that bounce back. And again, because we prepared for that kind of thing. Now, let me ask you, and this is the same exact thing that I do in my training course for the Vegas shooting, Hoping to Miss the Chaos. It's the first group exercise that we do. Let me ask, and you can answer in the chat, please. When we have an event that happens, I'm not even just talking about an active shooter or anything like that. Whatever kind of incident it is, what is your what is your usual first method of notification for an event happening? So someone can throw in the comments for me if possible. If you're going to be notified of something happening, how do we usually figure out? And hopefully. Hopefully, I'm not having terrible lag, as Tracy says there. Unfortunately, like Hank, I have internet that likes to go in and out. But the usual first, as Kimberly says there, it's a phone call. All right, it's a phone call that we first get a notification for something happening, and that phone call usually equals time, because you answer that phone, you process through your protocols and through your procedure. You send it to dispatch. The dispatcher looks at it. They send it out. The officers have to respond there. The fire engine has to respond there. What have you has to go there. And all of that equals time. Our first notification is that phone call, and that phone call equals time. On both the police and fire side, the first notification of something happening in relation to the active shooter was radio traffic.
1693 means we got shots fired at 4:15 ASO. Route 91, satellite automatic firearm.
And right then and there, you have to go. That's your moment to bounce back. Oh my God, I have a large concert, 22,000 people in attendance. It was day 3 of the Route 91 Harvest Festival with Jake Owen and Jason Aldean headlining. And it's a Sunday for you. It was a Sunday for us. If you listen to Nathan and Josh's session yesterday, it was a very typical day for us. It was a very typical Sunday, in the fact that most of the people on staff were in the lower seniority, because that's who's going to be your overnighters on a Sunday night. But we did family dinner where we were trying to do that every Sunday, where we would do potlucks, and all of a sudden in that quiet lull, that's what pops up on your radio. And that was the same thing on the fireside, because that was Engine 11's 22 words. And how you respond to that really makes a difference. And when we have the when we have the training class, I ask you, after you listen to this radio traffic, what are the next 5 things you're going to do? So when you get that opportunity presented to you, a 169 Sam Easy, I got shots fired at the Route 91 Harvest Festival, sounds like automatic gunfire. What are the next 5 things you're going to do? And that can really make or break your events. And it's been interesting in the times in the 2 years that we've been teaching the Vegas shooting class, is especially if you're teaching just one agency, where it's just everyone from the same agency, how varied the responses can be. And you would hope that those first 5 initial things are very uniform, because it was awesome, really. Josh and I were just recently at St. John's County, and I believe Debbie's here, and I really applaud her and her staff there for what they did. We were teaching on the second day on Thursday, and I asked this question, what are the next 5 things you're going to do? And almost in unison, the entire class just spit out the exact 5 things they were going to do. They mimicked the emergency tone that they would send out. They talked about sending backup units. They started about creating a call, sending EMS, what tools and what other resources that they were going to send out, and they were ready. All right. And what that does for you, not only from a response standpoint, but just from a stress level standpoint, is once you got those first 5 things out, you can focus on those next 5 things, and then those next 5 things, and you're not on your heels. All right. You're now in charge of that situation. I really loved what Tony Harrison said during his pre-con session, on the shots fired, and it's a little different here with obviously this being someone at the event, but when they're not at the event, even as they are, the first incident commander of that incident is you as a 911 dispatcher. You're in charge of moving those pieces until someone gets there, and then they kind of start giving you other orders. But that's why it's so important for those first initial decisions that need to be made. That's on our shoulders as dispatchers. So the more that you're prepared for those first 5 things, those first 5 actions, those first 5 policies that I got to pull out, those first 5 procedures, the more that you have that ingrained in you to respond, I guarantee you, the better you'll respond overall to the event. So when you're preparing for reality-based training, you want to have what I call the search for high fidelity, and the fact that you want it to mimic your normal environment every day. You want to make sure you have the same equipment, the same technology, mimic phone calls and radio traffic. When you do that, it's really key when you use role players or anyone, just to make sure that they're not goofing around, that they're saying the right things, they're using the right terminology, and using the right tone. And again, just making sure that you're matching that base level environment on your dispatch floor. Right before COVID hit, the last trip that Nathan and I and Josh took together was in Columbia, Missouri. And this is their training room in Columbia, Missouri. It's one of the nicest ones I've seen, at least in the centers that I've had the opportunity to go to. They have 5 consoles, and again, this is just their training room. They have 5 identical consoles that they bring their classes into, and I remember the director there saying, I want them to experience it in this controlled environment first, So when they go out there onto the floor and the dispatch center is on the other side of that glass there, it allows them to just already have that experience. So when you're looking at building a successful reality-based training program, and again, that's mostly just kind of dealing on drills and exercises, is making sure that you establish a baseline, especially if it's the first time you're doing this as an organization, or when you bring in your rookies in for the first time, or even when you're bringing in experienced staff into your training room, or however you have it set up, is let's just run through a couple of just basic set of calls so you kind of get used to just kind of the movements of how it works. Because it's also, role playing or going through this kind of stuff isn't everyone's cup of tea. Because again, we talked about, Leslie talked about, we all learn different ways. So this is just another one of those components you can use and one of those tools you can use in training. Make sure that when you finally get into the extensive drills and exercises that you do, that they're designed and they're scripted out. All right, you're not just kind of thinking off the cuff. All right, you want to have specific objectives. You want to have specific goals. Make sure you're training for those core performance elements that you hopefully have built into your CTO, into your training program, and that you're looking at critical skills. You're looking at decision-making. You're looking at prioritization of calls. You're looking at proper radio etiquette, tone of voice, looking at those things, again, that can really make or break an event. Feel free to include some gray area challenges where they're really kind of open-ended in how you want them to deal with it. And then also make sure you have the if you have the opportunity to train as a team, put more than just one dispatcher through this to make sure you can not only enhance the supervision of that event, but the communications in between the teamwork. And again, that's really because, and it goes back to the quote from Elliot Davis and this is one of my favorite quotes by William Durant, says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit." And again, training and going through this reality-based training is about building that habit. So those are automatic responses. Now, once you've kind of gotten the hang of going through that run-of-the-mill stuff when you're going through drills and exercises, is when you want to introduce what I call stress exposure. It's not what I call, but it's what they call stress exposure training. And that's further building a further reality of what it's like in the field by incorporating stressors into the events. As you can see, and I'm going to really hit on heavy task load and complexity of incidents here in just a second, but having those novelty calls that you don't deal with all the time. I remember back in Chicago, one of the more unique ones is it was just a block or two away from our 911 center. We had a technical rescue where it was, and again, we were in an urban area. It's not like we were out in the country or anything like that. But a guy was standing on top of a sand, like a grain bin that was next to a building that was under construction, and he happened to be standing in it, and he ended up sinking down into it, and it became like almost this elevated trench collapse, and it was just really off the wall. And the fact that they had to do a bucket brigade of almost like 30 firefighters just pulling out bucket of sand and trying to get a vacuum truck in there, but it had to have a long enough hose to reach 2 stories into the air. I mean, it was really just a complex call, and just kind of, if you introduce your trainees and your rookies and even your seasoned people to that kind of stuff before it really happens, again, I'm just going to go back to that'll better prepare you. Noise levels. How many people have been in a center, especially during a big critical event, and it's been quiet? Or there's not a whole lot of volume, there's not a whole lot of yelling, there's not a whole lot of talking. It's because it doesn't exist. You can almost tell a center gets busy or there's really something going on by the volume picks up, people start talking louder, you might have people yelling orders or those kind of things, building that into your environment. I go back to my football days and when they used to pipe in crowd noise and just being used to going through the motions and the calls and the audibles that we have when we had crowds yelling. And don't, we didn't have big crowds where I played. All right, we would maybe have like 1,000 people if we were lucky. But again, I mean, that's why professional teams will just bring in concert level speakers just to get them used to going through those motions of dealing with that noise level. And then, of course, technical issues, because we all have them. And I'm going to touch base on them again when it comes to 1 October, and then role conflicts, because it always kind of seems that anytime you have a really big critical event, it's your supervisor that just got promoted, or it's your acting supervisor, or it's just someone who's filling in, or maybe the supervisor went on break, so you just have your senior dispatcher, sitting there at the supervisor's desk for the moment, just kind of putting in some of those conflicts, those role conflicts into your training program. Now, when it came to the Las Vegas shooting, we talk about complexity events and preparing yourself for these. I go back to when I was at DUCOM again. One of the great trainers that I had, and I was fortunate to have a bunch of really fantastic trainers between Jackie Osborne and Jen Wickman and Ray Clark. Ray Clark taught me one of the most vital lessons, not only on a personal level, but on a professional level in a dispatch center. He taught me the proper way to make a pot of coffee, and I'll never forget that to this day. But I had a trainer named Francesca Giamatti, Kubica now, and she used to bring me into the training room, and she would start with just a run-of-the-mill event. It would be a traffic accident, and that traffic accident, when they got there, ended up being a train derailment. That train derailment had a bunch of hazardous materials on there. And then I had to medevac someone out of there. And lo and behold, that medevac crashed while they were on the way. And then there happened to be an armed robbery right next door. And that was just this kind of devolving event. And I would always tell her, you know what, okay, settle down, Jack. That's not going to happen. But fast forward 12 years of my life to the Route 91 Harvest Festival shooting. And in the first 75 minutes, all of this is what happened. The star you see on your screen is the concert venue, the Las Vegas Villages, where the concert venue happened. Within the first half hour or so, we obviously had the active shooter, but originally it was a report of 2 active shooters on the ground in the concert grounds, and it a little trigger happy there. It wasn't until the third reported active shooter that actually said he was from an elevated position at the Mandalay Bay. But it wasn't even just those 3.
Command, go ahead, dispatch.
Have reports that there's an active shooter at New York, New York.
We had reports of active shooters not only at Mandalay Bay and the concert venue, but as you heard Carolyn say, we had active shooters reported at the Tropicana, the Excalibur, the MGM, the New York, as she said, and as far north as the Bellagio Casino. We had 8 different reports of active shooters within those first 30 to 45 minutes as we tried to figure out what happened. If that wasn't enough, on the east side of the concert venue at the Luxor Casino, and again, all of this I'm about to tell you happened within the first 75 minutes of the event. On the east side of the concert venue, Luxor Casino was starting to do sweeps of their property. They found a vehicle that was suspicious in one of their parking garages, was loaded with wires, with cameras, which a bunch of equipment that they didn't know what it was. They had never seen any of it before. So, and I vividly remember taking this call from Metro when they called us and they said, hey, we need your bomb squad. We have this suspicious vehicle. And I remember first telling them that we were closed and that they needed to call someone else. But I remember just going, oh my God, we have all these active shooters, we have all these patients, but now we got to page out the bomb squad and we got to go through all of that rigmarole. And what that ended up being, as we figured out, it was almost days later. I don't really think we figured out then was that it was one of Google's autonomous driving vehicles, one of those driverless cars. They were doing a test drive from San Francisco to Las Vegas in preparation for a convention that was coming in after, the week or two afterwards, and they had just parked it at the Luxor for some reason, and no one really knew it was there. So when they saw it, it was really suspicious. Because we had just dealt with that on the east side of the concert venue, and most of the people ran east because the guy was obviously firing from the west. Someone had dropped their backpack, and one of the guys in the EMS branch was walking around and found this backpack, but the backpack had 2 cardboard tubes in it. And because we were already dealing with that other bomb squad response, we really had to treat everything like it was suspicious because we legitimately thought we were under attack. And those 2 tubes looked like pipe bombs. And so, of course, we had a second bomb squad call out for them to go over there. And they ended up just being poster tubes from the concert. But again, in that moment, in the heat of the moment, you're really not sure what's going on. If all of that wasn't enough, the base of the arrows is the concert venue. They're pointing to the east, and directly to the east of the event by not directly, maybe about 2 blocks or so. What you see there on the left-hand side of your screen is one of the 2 main runways for a little airport called McCarran International Airport. One of the top 10 busiest airports in the world on a consistent basis. And as people were running east, they didn't let anything stop them, including the barrier fences for McCarran International Airport, having driven 2 vehicles through it and people hopping over the fences. They were running onto the runways, and we had to shut down the airport, and that became a whole nightmare dealing with the federal side of it and the FAA and Homeland Security. And if all of that wasn't enough, right about the 75-minute mark, this happened.
Boulevard Command, Fire Dispatch.
Boulevard Command, go ahead, dispatch.
Boulevard Command, be advised we're getting reports on the 34th floor of Mandalay Bay. There's been an explosion in the 32nd, 33rd, and 34th floor on fire.
Well, that was Jordan Fox.
Dispatch, Mandalay Bay, fire 32, 33, 34. We're on it. Operation, you copy?
Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself there. Getting a little tight on time, so I'm going to move a little quicker here. That was Jordan Fox, and she was reporting a call we got from Mandalay Bay Security, basically stating that they had an explosion and that they had 3 floors of a 65-plus story hotel that were now on fire because of an explosion. And if you think about that, 8 active shooters, 2 bomb squad responses. You have people, running onto the airport. All of that within those first 60 minutes, and you hit that 75-minute mark, and you now have this high-rise hotel on fire. Now, luckily, we kind of mitigated that one rather quickly because that was Metro breaching the door. They had to do 2 sets of explosions. The first one was breaching the main hotel door into suite 32135, and then the second door, 32134, because he had rented 2 adjoining rooms. And Metro obviously wasn't broadcasting the fact that they were doing breaches, at least the security and those kind of things. So when people started reporting the explosion, fire alarms started going off, reports of smoke, all those kind of things, they just, of course, assumed that there had been something else going on. So 75 minutes, again, 8 active shooters, 2 bomb squads, people running on a major federal airport, and a high-rise apartment fire. When I tell you to overwhelm your trainees and your people, do it in the training room. And as much as I used to give Franny a hard time, and I'll still give her a hard time because I love Franny, I never will ever forget the training that we had because it prepared you for these kind of complex events. Each one of these events on their own is a career type of event. But when you put them all together, that just really overwhelms you. And when you're talking about even building a little bit of further complexity, one of the things that we were really fortunate didn't happen is at the right side of the red arrow that you see there on your screen, the two white circles, you can kind of see them on the far left side of your screen here, kind of right near the middle. You can see the Mandalay Bay and the concert grounds there in the middle. You can see the green shell of the concert. Those two white tanks are fuel tanks for the private airport side, because that's mostly private airports on that west side of the airport there. But that's the fuel tanks for the private airports, or the private planes there at McCarran. And what he had done is he actually had fired at them. It was some of his first initial shots were into those fuel tanks, and we believe his hope was to make them explode and pull people towards him. As you can see on the screen there, he ended up hitting them twice. This was the first one at the very top. And luckily he didn't know. All he had to do was really watch Mythbusters. Jet fuel is mostly kerosene based, so it has a very high incendiary point. So just shooting it with a bullet is not going to cause it to explode. Maybe if you had tracer rounds or any of those kind of things, it would make a difference. But again, just, that's another complexity to that kind of event. So, when you're looking at these stressors you're putting into your training program, are they preparing you for that kind of thing? Preparing for an active shooter by itself is overwhelming, like I said, by itself, but putting all of that together becomes even more. And if you even want to tack on some more, talking about technical issues, right about 4 a.m. or so, it might have been a little bit earlier than that. It was right about the time we were transitioning from a rescue to a recovery. We had basically run all the calls that we were going to run when it came to the incident, and we were now unfortunately just doing body recovery. The investigators started coming on duty for Metro, for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and they were going through their typical routine of going to the computer system and pulling up the CAD report. And at that point in time, the CAD report, about 6 hours into the event, was already several hundred pages long. But when all of them, or the several investigators that they had, pulled it up all at the same time, it crashed the system. And Metro on their dispatch side, not knowing that this is what the investigators were doing, noticed that their CAD had slowed down and wasn't responding, all the way to the point that they were starting to prepare to go on paper operations, that they were going to just have to go on old school cards and paper. Still in the middle of all of this, and it was because of a technical issue that was no fault of their own, and it was user-based technical issue. So again, just another thing of throwing that in, because you always feel like, when you're going to have, you rely on all this technology, but you have that one moment where you might have a chance to use it, and it doesn't work. And again, just building that into your training program. When you do stress exposure training, or just training or preparing for these really complex events, it's just when you do your initial stress exposure, just make sure that it's not overwhelming. You want to make sure you get the basic competency and the basic training when you go into that environment first. But you don't want to throw that kind of event at your person the first thing that they do. You want to kind of just introduce it incrementally. But also you want to make sure that when you finally get to that end game, you're not having no stress and you're not having consistently high stress, because the two of them are going to be counterproductive and you're not going to get anything out of the entire experience. And this is one of the really great quotes that I got out of the book that I read on reality-based training. Basically says, the more information you have about reacting to stress and the likely effects of stress on a task, the better you're going to anticipate them and the less distracting they're going to be in the operational environments. And when you read the after-action reports, especially the ones by FEMA, all of those cascading events the multiple active shooters, the bomb squad, the airport, all that kind of stuff. They refer to them as distraction events. There were 15 of them in total during that event. And just the more you're prepared for those kind of distraction events, and I've said it 15 times already, and I'm going to say it 15 more times, the better you're going to be prepared. When reality-based training isn't an option, because it's not always an option for everybody, do the best that you can to have simulation-based training, or if you're looking at some of those other ways of what Leslie talked about, if you have more auditory learners, where maybe group discussions are going to do better for you, or tabletop exercises, especially when you're looking at technology or equipment upgrades or cutovers, making sure that you're walking through the entirety of the events. I've been through 3 UPS upgrades in my center. I've been through a CAD cutover and a phone cutover, and just making sure that you're working through every kind of thing that might happen. When we had the latest UPS cutover that we had in Las Vegas, we had really greatly prepared for everything that was going to happen, and we really planned it out. But we had an unseasonable, this is kind of oxymoronic to say in Las Vegas, we had an unseasonably warm day, but it was unseasonably warm for that particular time. And we're on the 3rd floor of the fire headquarters, and we had a bunch of fans to make sure that we were cool, because they had to take all the power down, and we were operating on paper and handheld radios and flashlights and all that kind of stuff. But we didn't judge really well how warm it would be in there, so we set up fans that we were using off generators and everything, or not off generators, but from other power areas that were still available in the building. But then our equipment room started getting warmer than we anticipated, so we had to start cooling that down, so that took away our fans. And again, that's just another kind of wrench in the plan of making sure that you're prepared for those kind of things. And then especially when you want to do whole agency drills and stuff like that, we can't always send everyone through that kind of reality-based training, so just kind of creating other avenues. Looking beyond your training program, this section was actually going to be a little bit longer until I watched Joe Serio's pre-con course. And I really urge all of you to go look at that, where he talks about vision eats culture for lunch. Because, and this is one of the big things that I took out of it, is the task or the incident or the response is only just part of what it takes to respond to these kinds of events. You really, really need to look just beyond the training program and looking at the health and the wellness of your organizational culture. Because if you don't emphasize teamwork, communication, positive infectious behavior, championing people first, and doing all those kind of things, you might have the best and most fantastic training program, but if you don't do all of that other stuff, none of it's going to matter. None of it's going to matter. And one of the things that I really try and preach on, and we really try and preach on at the foundation, is leaving your ego at the door. Because, and this is one of my favorite quotes from Phil Jackson, is good teams become great when the members trust each other enough to surrender the me for the we. And that is one of the things that I took out of our response to the 1 October shooting is, and I get this question all the time, when you look at the entirety of the event from about 10 p.m. to 10 to about 6 or 7 a.m. the next day, 18 total people, dispatchers and supervisors, worked at that event over the entirety. More than half of them were less than 2 years of service. All right. The newest person on staff that day, her name is Nellie Rodriguez. For those of you that watched Josh, that was his trainee at that point in time. She wasn't even fully certified for radio dispatching, and the ink was just barely dry on her phone sign off. And she was just kind of in that float period where she was on her own. And I don't even think she had been there 6 months. And that was most of the people. Carolyn Burns, who you heard, she's the one that answers Engine 11. She was less than 2 years. Jordan Fox, you heard there, was less than 2 years. Aubrey Holmes, Monet Foster, Darren Larson, all those people, less than 2 years of service. And as much as you want to have your most senior people in that kind of moment, because you think they're the most experienced, we really tried to emphasize the fact that it isn't just me. I'm the most senior, so I'm going to walk in and I'm going to be the dispatcher. As we looked at the we. All right. And this was all about teamwork, and this was all about collaboration, and this was all about just making sure that we approach this together. Because as much, and they performed probably the best out of everyone that in that entire event, because they weren't jilted, they weren't crusty, they were enthusiastic, they had that flame, they had that fire, they just wanted to do best, they wanted to save lives, and they had that energy. And we fed off of that, and you feed off of that in those kind of environments. You could feel that positive energy in those kind of moments. But it became the we, and it became the flip side, is as much as we relied on them in that moment, it was the aftermath where it came back to us as senior people to make sure that they were prepared for what was going to happen next, what was going to come, and what the emotional aftermath was going to be like. To think that we're in this environment where we face trauma every day, and as it says, the expectation that we're going to be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. All right, it is going to happen. So you need to be prepared for what comes afterwards. Make sure you build and maintain an effective peer support team. Go look at Tina's training about Helping Hand. Tina DeCola, another trainer with the foundation. Go look at JC Ferguson and Pam and what they're doing with Nina and peer training, and all the other stories we've had today about peer support and PTSD. Make sure you're holding the briefings after large and traumatic incidents, and there's a whole process of how you need to do that effectively. Make sure you're identifying stress. You're teaching people how to manage stress and look at effective self-care, and making sure you're promoting healthy self-care ideas, and never devalue the power of one. One quick example, or just two real quick examples, again, going back and just trying to hammer home the reality. Again, at that 4 a.m. moment when we were transitioning into that recovery point, in our center, you could hear a pin drop. We had just got hit by a Mack truck. We had no idea what was happening. And David Westbrooks walks in. He's our most senior dispatcher. He was 27 years of service at that point in time. He's at 29 now. He's talking about finally retiring, getting ready to hit over 30 years of service. And he walked in, saw how quiet it was, and just started walking around and cracking jokes and talking to people and talking about sports and just doing those kind of things, because that's what we needed at that moment. We just needed to know what to do next. Jacqueline Ridley, one of the other people that was working the event, when she finally got a moment where she could stand up, she walked around and she would put a hand on your shoulder and she would say, do you want to talk for a moment? Do you want to say a prayer? Do you just want to have a moment of inflection? And I can't tell you the power of just having one person put their hand on your shoulder and just saying, I'm here for you, really did for us in the heat of that moment. And overall, just as I love what Tracy Eldridge always says is this smash that stigma of it's okay to not be okay. That these things are going to affect us. And it's not even just critical events like this. It can be anything. Josh always talks about, what's heavier, a ton of bricks or a ton of feathers. All right. They're the same thing. Some are going to hit you a little quicker and some are going to be really long. All right. And you got to respond to them the other way, and just making sure that you're making it okay for people to acknowledge the fact that they're not okay. So I ask you one more time, are you ready for your 22 words? Engine 11, do you have reports of anything? You got a large crowd running from us. Sounds like automatic gunfire. That was our 22 words. That was our moment. And while we have maybe didn't have a lot of that reality-based training and all that kind of stuff prepared in that kind of moment. We had glimpses of it. We're starting to get better at that. So again, this is an evolving process. I can guarantee you we had the whole full circle picture of it. And if you were to look at the Denise Amber Lee Foundation and Denise, and when you look at just Denise's call, it was a training issue, but you look at Jane Kowalski's call, that was an organizational culture issue. And again, it's putting all of it together. Making sure that you're prepared for when you walk into your center the next, and when you know, I know some of you are in your centers right now, but when that phone rings or when that radio keys up, one of the things that makes this job stressful but also makes it awesome is we have no idea what's on the other end. So every time you need to ask yourself, are you ready? For when you finally answer that phone or you finally say, go ahead, can you bounce back from that? And I really hope the answer is yes. And if the answer is not yes right now, what are you going to do to change that? And everything you guys have done here today with the session, not with just my sessions, but with all the sessions, is you preparing for that moment. And when you finally face your 22 words, I just hope you're ready. I really do, because what we do as dispatchers is incredibly awesome. We have the awesome opportunity to make differences in each other's lives. And I always love saying at the end of every class that I teach, you know, people spend their entire lives wondering if they made a difference, just hoping that they did something good. All we got to do is pick up the phone, and I guarantee you 100% you're going to make the difference, and never, ever lose sight of that. So thank you for being here today. You've got my contact information up there. You can email me if you have any questions. If you're curious about what's going on with the foundation, you can text DELF to 66866. You can go onto our website. We have a bunch of really great, fantastic free training. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. I want to be your friend. I want to make sure that I am doing everything possible within my hands, within my abilities, to make sure that you're prepared and that you're ready. Ricardo, I thank you for giving me about 5 extra minutes. I apologize to who's coming after me. But I appreciate everything that you're doing for the foundation, for not only for us at the foundation, but for 911 overall. Leah, thank you for being the dark knight in the background there, and just kind of making sure everything works smoothly and safely. Go be awesome, everyone. Thank you for attending today. It's a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you, man, so much for this session. You know, I saw a portion of this at the Navigator Conference a year or so ago now, and man, it was standing room only, literally to the point where I remember I was standing like this because there were so many people in the room, and I got a chance to speak with everyone at the end, and it was just, man, just thank you so much for everything and for sharing your knowledge. There was one question here that I want to get to before we jump off here. Also, there is a Dare to Be Great Fall Virtual Conference group on Facebook that you can join. It's facebook.com/groups/DTBG2. You can join that, where we can continue the conversation, and the video that you shared in the beginning, you can put in there as well. And all those that are here, you can see that there when it's added. But the question that was asked here is, were communications personnel involved in the debriefing after the Las Vegas event?
Yes, we were on actually 2 different avenues from a couple different aspects. We had a communications only debriefing. We had 2 of them. The first one I attended to. This event happened on Sunday. I attended debriefing on Wednesday. It was voluntary. I say that in quotes, and that's a whole story that I don't have time to get into. But we did have a communications only debriefing. We have a really fantastic. We did, because she just transferred to another department. Her name is Angela Leith. She's our crisis administration person, and she was really fantastic in making sure that we had all the resources available to us, whether it came to counseling or peer support or critical incident stress management, all those kind of things. So yeah, all that stuff was afforded to us. When FEMA came in and did their after action report, it was further down the line, but it was maybe about 6 to 7 months down the line. They even brought all of us in as dispatchers from both the police and fire side, along with all the responders. And they were obviously wanting to learn what happened and where they could improve. But again, it just became another really giant debriefing for all of us because we were all just kind of struggling through the same things. So we were included on a lot of different fronts.
Perfect. Awesome. And then, hold on here. There's one more that came in here that we'll answer really quick. Did they continue to follow up with you months or weeks after the event?
Yeah, they did. A lot of our peer support people would call us, would check in on us. Dennis and Susie and Tina were always checking in on me, at least, to make sure that we were okay. And and it wasn't perfect. I mean, there were moments that we have improved upon, and that's a whole other class, those kind of things. But yeah, they continue to check up on every time the anniversary comes around. We just had the 3-year anniversary last week. There's opportunities for us again to seek counseling, to seek respite, and do those kind of things. So yeah, it's a continual process.
Excellent. Thank you so much for answering those here right at the end. And for any of you who are watching on replay, of course, you can go back after this is in replay, and you can go to those questions and click on them, and it'll take you exactly to the clip where Matt was explaining all of this. So thank you again, brother, for doing this and for the session and for everything that you do, man. Have a good one.
Anytime, man. Take care, everyone.
Everyone who is here, I will be bringing you all with me here in just a moment. Have a good one.